Welcome everybody to our special event, Publishing Textbooks as a VIR Trainee. This is in collaboration with the West Coast Vascular and Interventional Society. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Ashley. I'm an MS4 at Hofstra, and I'm the executive chair of the trainee section at WCVIS. And I will be hosting this session with Lindsay, who is currently a PGY3 at Mount Sinai VIR. So we are incredibly fortunate to have these two amazing speakers with us today. I will start by introducing them. So first we have Dr. Keefe. Dr. Keefe is an assistant professor at UNC VIR as well as the program director of this program. She completed her medical school training at SUNY Upstate, and she did her residency at University of Virginia as well as her vascular and interventional radiology fellowship. And she is the author of the IR playbook, which she wrote during her residency. Okay. And then next we have Dr. Aesha Patel. She is a PGY5 at Rush VIR. She completed her medical school training at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, and she is currently at Rush. And she has written the limb preservation for the vascular specialist in collaboration with Dr. Metasari. So both of our speakers bring a vast wealth of knowledge. We're trying to keep this session pretty informal. So if you guys have any questions at any point, please feel free to speak up and ask. We also have a list of questions as well. So without further ado, I will just stop sharing so we can focus on our speakers. Just a sec. All right. I guess we could just start by having the both of you, I know I already gave a brief introduction, but just give a brief spiel about yourself and about the textbook that you wrote and what inspired you to write it.
I guess I'll start. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Please don't hesitate to interrupt with any sort of questions or comments that you have during the session here. So when I was a medical student back in the day, which was not that long ago, but there really weren't any resources for medical students. There's a handful of books out there, Candarpa, Abrams Angiography, but none of them really focused on medical students because med students were never who we looked for. It was always fellows before. You were always looking at residents to recruit. So I was part of the clinical pathway, which really predates the IR residency, but the IR residency was coming up around when I was a trainee. So as a med student, I felt like there's this paucity of resources. So I was trying to find something. And that's where I kind of came up with the idea of like making a book for med students. I actually wrote one of the chapters when I was at Penn on my OA elective, just like sitting on the couch doing nothing in the evenings. And so when I got to UVA, I approached a few of our attendings there, Alwan Park, Zeev Haskell, and Fritz Engel about this idea. Zeev Haskell was like, well, that's really cool, but I don't know like how this is going to work. So give me an example chapter. So I wrote the uterine artery embolization chapter and presented it to him, which is, as I'm sure you guys have seen from the IR playbook, very different than any other textbooks are written, with like key point boxes, how-to boxes, really things that I wanted that if I was going to get pimped in a case, or if they were going to ask me questions, what I would go to. And then all of the other background information that you really need to thrive on your away elective, or even in residency. So that worked out really well for me, that he liked the idea. We continued honing in on what the book would look like. We came up with a ridiculous number of chapters, and the book is much larger than I ever envisioned it would be. But, we found a publisher and it worked out well. And we just finished publishing the second edition actually a few months ago. Although it was a ridiculous amount of work and you make approximately 4 cents per hour that you work on the book, so you don't go into it for the money. But it was a really rewarding experience. And I hope that you all are benefiting now from, the fruits of that labor at the time.
Hi, everyone. My name's Aesha. I am a PGY. I just started PGY5 at Rush. So I have a slightly different story. My book is on limb preservation for the vascular specialist. So that includes, anyone who kind of does vascular interventions, a collaboration mostly between IR, vascular surgery, interventional cardiology, podiatry, plastic surgery, to kind of all a multidisciplinary approach to limb preservation. This was kind of started when I was a PGY2, so did not know much about limb preservation. So it was actually my attending who's kind of dedicated his career towards it, who approached me asking if I would like to help him kind of write this book with him. And he had come up with the idea because there really isn't a good book to discuss a multidisciplinary approach and just have everything together. There's a lot of like research articles and papers, but nothing all together in one. So that was kind of his inspiration to have everything together and kind of help all of these different services work together to preserve limbs. So yeah, so we kind of came up with it and you know how it would go together, but it was mostly his kind of brainchild. And since he's been in the field for so long, he knows all the vascular surgeons, interventional cardiologists, plastic surgeons and stuff that are involved and who were our collaborators. So my role in this was kind of getting all of that coordinated, put together, getting all of these collaborators on board. And then once everyone had their kind of chapters or sections, putting it all together into a cohesive book. And yeah, so that was kind of my role in it. But it was a tremendous learning opportunity. I just never, I think one of my goals was to write a chapter in a textbook. Never really thought I would be writing a textbook as a resident. So I definitely owe him a lot for kind of getting me involved. And I think one of the things that kind of helped get me involved was I did reach out to him pretty early on for research opportunities. And I did deliver pretty quickly on those. So he saw that I put in work and I put an effort into what I do, which kind of was probably the reason that he reached out to me to help him with this.
So both of those bodies of work, I know it's just a couple minutes to talk about it, but I'm sure there was an insane amount of work that went into both of them. You guys tell us a bit about, yeah, I can't imagine. Like, if you had to describe like one or two challenges to like start with, and then if you'd give any advice to yourself, before you started the project, what would it be?
Yeah. Do you want to take this one first, Aesha?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I think, so Dr. Matasari had come up with kind of like a outline of how he wanted the book and what he thought it should be like. And then he kind of came up with an outline of who he wants to be talking about each subject, basically specialists in that certain subject. And we kind of, let everyone kind of do what they wanted. His idea was he wanted a short kind of like pocket handbook on limb preservation. So he used like bullet points, short paragraphs, but not a lot of, I think, detail in how we wanted this. So everyone kind of responded in a very different format. So putting that together in a cohesive book where someone's writing very detailed paragraphs, someone's literally putting bullet points, someone's sending like cell phone photos of images, someone's sending really good images. The amount of effort it took to make that readable and sound like it was one person kind of putting everything together was a lot more than expected. Actually, I think I misheard him when he first asked me to work on this, and I thought he was working on a chapter in a textbook. So I was like, yeah, sure. And then he's like, no, we're doing the whole book. I was like, okay, well, can't back out now. Too late.
I think I was the person who submitted bullet points when I submitted my chapter for your book.
And then the other thing that happened was Springer, who's our publisher, wanted like one references cited. But obviously everyone who submits their parts has their own like references. And since we're talking about PAD stuff, everyone is going to be using a lot of the same journals and papers and big kind of articles. So I had to go through every section's references, and anything that was doubled, I needed to renumber and get rid of and figure that out. And I think overall there's probably about 400 references with 50 different authors. So it was a very tedious work, I think. probably read it from front to back about 10 to 15 times. We went back and forth with edits about 4 or 5 times. So way more tedious than expected. I think overall it took about 2 years from start to finish.
I would echo a lot of what you already said, that finding a cohesive voice among all of the chapters when each author submits something different, even though we had a very set algorithm of how we wanted each chapter to be, that is not necessarily what we got. So it's an extensive amount of editing so that each chapter looked the same way, so that, you know, when you flip through, it's exactly what you expect it to be. That for me was one of the biggest hurdles. Also, especially as a trainee writing this, you don't have the vast number of resources that attendings do. I don't think that you could write a textbook like this without, like any textbook really, without attending support, because they know the experts in each field. And so that was something I relied extensively on my co-editors for, is to help identify who would be the right author to help kind of build up the reputation of this textbook, so that we had leading authors in every single field of IR writing those chapters, which really built a lot of clout on this, the same way that you guys did. But you know, it could never be the trainee that's helping do that. The last part that was really hard for me is that the timing of it happened to be during my 3rd year of residency. And so I literally submitted the last part, the final revisions, to Springer the day before my core exam, which was suboptimal timing, but you know, succeeded through that anyways.
Yeah, that's awesome. Agreed with also being, I think one of the main things is being a trainee during publishing this. The topics that were being discussed are definitely high level. So trying to understand, so I was learning while also putting something together. And, you know, saying like, Dr. Matasari specifically wanted also like a junior level resident to be able to read this and kind of understand and learn from it. So it did help that when I was doing it, you know, I didn't know a lot of things, like I've never seen a DVA before. So, you know, when someone's talking about the step-by-step process for a DVA, I'm trying to picture it in my head. And if it doesn't make sense to me, then I go to Dr. Matasari and I'm like, hey, did they discuss this in detail enough? Or should we reach out to them more? Does this make sense? Or not. So that was a lot of back and forth on just understanding topics that they're even talking about. So it's definitely more difficult as a trainee, but I think it helps from a readability standpoint, being a trainee and trying to understand things.
Building on that, as a trainee, I couldn't be a content expert. The attendings had to be. So when I was a trainee doing this, I was the like the copy editor. I went through every single chapter to make sure they were all the same. Now, when we did the 2nd edition, I was a content expert. So, you know, instead of splitting the chapters between, you know, Fritz Engels, Eve Haskell, and Allen Park to be content experts, we now split it 4 ways. And I still went through as the copy editor to make sure that everything, you know, is the same amongst our chapters. So just a tedious amount of work, but worth it in the long run.
Just to echo what you guys have already started talking about, I did receive this question in the chat about how do you balance the demand of training and doing something of this magnitude? I know you guys have some part addressed that, but could you just elaborate a bit further?
It's a really hard question to answer, and I think it's very individual, because it depends on what else you have going on in your life. For me at the time, I didn't have any children. My husband worked a very demanding job, so this took up all of my vacation time, all of my evenings, all of my weekends, all of, you know, we didn't really get many academic days, but you make that sacrifice willingly, because this is what you want to do, knowing it's a short-term project. Unlike, you know, a research project that may, you know, maybe not quite as grueling, or could be, depending on what you're doing. But the clout you get from a textbook, or the value it has on your CV, is far less than that of a research paper. Research papers are what's going to help you get promoted in the long run. It's what's going to build your scientific, you know, rapport, really help build your research that you do in the future. A textbook does not do that for you. And they warned me strongly against doing it. I remember sitting down with Al Matsumoto being like, he's like, you should not do this. It is not worth the amount of hours that you're going to put into it, because you could do 15 really strong research papers and it'd be worth so much more to you in the long run. But that didn't change the fact that this is something I felt very passionate about, and I still wanted to do it despite the challenges that would come with it. It's not easy. It definitely took a lot of sacrifices. I probably did worse on the core exam than I could have if I wasn't. But hey, I aced the IR section.
So I think for me, if I were writing it right now as a PGY 5, I wouldn't have time. I think everyone's residency is a little bit different too, and where you have time. I started this as a PGY 2, so you're an R1 first year as a radiology resident, where you don't take any call. So when I went home, this is what I worked on. I was doing some research on the side as well, but majority of my weekends and nights were spent kind of watching TV in the background and editing these chapters. I did go into PGY 3 with it as well, where you do take quite a bit of call at Rush, but when I wasn't on call, this is what I was doing. I think maybe, something has to usually give with training and stuff. So I do think maybe I could have probably spent more time learning diagnostic radiology a little bit earlier, instead of learning the details for core a little bit later. But I chose to focus my time on this as a PGY 3. And then towards the end of PGY 3, I started studying more actual radiology. And then I had all of PGY 4 to also study for the core. But it's kind of a balance of what you choose to spend your time on. Like Nikki said, I could have probably pumped out multiple papers in that time, which, could have went further. But I think this was an amazing opportunity. I learned so much from it. And I would do it again. I think me and Dr. Matisari always joke about edition 2. And he's like, "You ready?" And I was like, "I don't think
Great,
so."
it'll
But
come.
I would do it again. I think the amount you learn during this, and also the mentors you build, and just everything you learn from it is very valuable in our future careers.
Were there any unexpected benefits from writing a textbook? So mentorship, sure, but anything unexpected that surprised you going through that process?
Unexpected benefit.
So.
Well, the question in the chat was what benefits come from writing a book as a trainee. So just kind of in general, I think it depends on what you're writing and what your role is. So for me, my role, and I met all of these legends in IR, and I was harassing them via email, being like, your chapter's late. And then, I met so many of them in person at SIR. So even though the book itself did not boost my CV as much, the network that I built from it, and the connections that I made, such that I'm on a first name basis with, as a trainee, so many very prestigious IRs across the country, was worth its weight in gold.
I echo that. I think, as a PGY 2, I'm sitting emailing all of these big named IRs across the country. And at that point, they didn't know my face, but they did know my name. And then Dr. Matisari introduced me to everyone at SIR. And then even just within our own residency, I think, just doing this, Dr. Arsan, our chair, and everything kind of from the amount of work I put into this book, they immediately knew how hardworking I was, and what I'm able to do if I put in the effort. So it kind of just helped get my name both at Rush and across the country with IRs.
I think it also helps people understand, from a trainee standpoint, if you're writing a full textbook or even just a chapter for a textbook, your work ethic. because, there can be 10 names on a research paper, and it's impossible to tell how much you contributed to that paper, how well your writing is, how well your research part, background research is. But to do a textbook chapter and write it well, you know, that shows a lot for people. And if someone has done it well, like, because I see all of those chapters coming in, and if you submit a chapter and I'm like, oh, well, this is good writing, I would want to do research with you in the future, because I know that you can do that background research. I know that you can write well. And that goes a long way, I think, in being able to publish in the future, whether in a scientific journal or in a textbook.
I agree with that. Yep.
I'm going to briefly pause just to see if the audience has any questions that they would like to ask, and if not, I'll ask another question. All right, I'll ask a question. So, how important was collaboration in your textbook project? And can you share any tips on finding and working with co-authors, editors, and mentors?
I can start. So, I mean, I think both of our textbooks were written by multiple collaborators, so it wouldn't be possible without collaboration. I think we had about 50 authors actually. So again, we definitely needed a collaboration. Dr. Mataseri had built a network of friends, mentors, and coworkers that he could rely on to help him out. And then I was then open to that network, and I started meeting them. So it wouldn't have been possible without collaboration, and the network that Dr. Mataseri had built to be able to do this project for him. So I think even if you're not writing a textbook, having people you can rely on to help you out when you need it, or if you have an idea to kind of be there for you, is important in your future field, wherever you want to go, whether it's private practice, academic, or anything. Just having these people that you can kind of rely on definitely is the only way that both of our textbooks were written. And then I think in terms of future collaboration, I think now basically since I met all of these people, I think now if I ever were to need them in the future or anything like that, it would be easy for them to come to me or for me to go to them.
I echo all of that part. I don't really have anything to add, but I think one of the biggest and most challenging parts is when you have an idea, or if you have something, is where to go and what to do with it. So I had the idea when I was a med student, and I'm sure I told people about it. Joji, I'm sure I told you when I was on my rotation at Pfizer, and I'm sure you probably told me that I was crazy and stupid and that I wasn't going to go anywhere with this. But eventually, someone, he said, yes, I knew you would crush it. But eventually someone is going to be like, okay, so what do you really mean with this? And, finding that someone, whoever that is, that's going to believe in you and push you to succeed and push you to do the book, and every step of the way. And for me, that was Zeev Haskell. He was like, show me you want to do this. And I had to come up with like a PowerPoint presentation and all of this stuff. And I approached all of the editors, and to the credit of my co-editors, and I cannot speak more highly about the three of them, the Springer came back and said, we want Zeev or Fritz to be the first author, right? Because they've got the national name. They've got the clout. They have the draw of making this a premier textbook. And they supported me, and they said, either I would be the first editor, or we would go with someone else. And that just spoke volumes to me about who they are as a person, but also their support of me in doing this project, and how they felt that I could bring it to fruition. So finding that right person to bring your idea to and presenting it to them, it's impossible to know who that right person is going to be. You just have to try them. Like, just try talking to people about it and say, and some people are going to tell you no, and some people are just going to laugh you off until you find the right person.
I had a similar experience. So I think Dr. Madiseri had come up with the idea. So he had initially reached out to Springer with an outline. And since my name wasn't on the original kind of contract, at the end, Springer had basically said that my name wasn't allowed to be on the cover because I wasn't on the original outline. And I wasn't CC'd into any of these emails. So I didn't even know what was going on behind the scenes. We didn't really talk about where my name was going to be. But I think Dr. Madiseri saw the amount of time and effort I put in. And he, in the background, kind of fought for my name to be on the cover. And then at some point, my name was CC'd into something. And then I went back and read all those emails and saw how much he fought for me to be on the cover. But he could have easily, just been like, oh, okay, that's fine. Her name will be like first thing inside or something. So it just, not only did I learn so much from the book, but I built this invaluable mentor that I can, really rely on and trust to just to be there for me when needed.
It just reminds me when you were talking about that, backing up to the prior question that someone asked about what do you benefit as a trainee in writing a textbook? I think aside from your exposure to other people, really your knowledge base. So for me, that was the entire spectrum of IR. For you, that was, CLI and ALI, and really understanding those things to become a content expert so that you can speak at a much higher level. For me, I felt like, I was so well prepared for the rest of my training and for fellowship because I had all of the knowledge base behind me. And even if it's a smaller spectrum than the IR playbook is, as most other textbooks will be, it still becomes something that you know more about than anybody else. You wrote that textbook on it. You wrote that chapter on that. Like, you become the content expert that people look to.
That's incredible. Going a little bit more general, do you have any advice for, those very enthusiastic residents and med students who are interested in projects, or just any general advice? Because we have a lot of very enthusiastic people on here that want to be the best VIR they can be.
You got to be more general. Advice on residency or life or writing a textbook or research or what?
Let's do textbook and then let's do residency.
Okay, so I guess advice on writing a textbook is, I think, know what you're signing up for. Same with research or anything you do. If you say yes and can't deliver, it looks worse than saying no. So I think definitely know what you're signing up for. Writing a textbook is not like a 1 month kind of thing. It's years. So you have to be able to put in that time and effort, and you have to kind of prioritize it and put other things to the side. So if you can't put in that time and effort, then it's better to say no, or kind of, put aside that goal for another time when you do have the availability in your life to be able to do it. Advice for residency. I guess that's also kind of general advice is find good co-residents who can really, help you out when you need it. I think especially starting PGY 5 right now, I'm kind of really feeling that. It's huge learning curves in all of radiology. I think we do a general surgery intern year at Rush, and then a huge learning curve starting radiology. You're not exposed to it at all in medical school. So you sit down the first day and you're looking at a chest X-ray and you're like, what do I even talk about? And all of our 1 year is just what am I looking at? And then call starts, and then that's a big learning curve of trying to pick up speed and making your own decisions before the next morning when the attending reads them. And then IR starts, and then that's a whole new ball game of learning curve. So I'm only 5 weeks in to PGY 5, and the amount I've had to rely on my co-residents and people to be there to help me and help with burnout and things like that are invaluable. So I think my general advice is to make really good friends, and be there for your co-residents, because there's going to be a time where you need them.
Advice on the textbook first. You said know what you're getting into, and I don't think you could ever have an idea of what you're getting into. It's way more work than I ever anticipated, even though people told me it's way more work than you'll anticipate. So I don't think you can know, but just prepare for the worst. And you'll get something, some amazing outcome. There's so many good textbook ideas out there. Finding the right group of people to write it with, and the co-authors and all of that, make your job much easier. It's not just a content expert, because those people aren't always good authors. They aren't good writers always. So it's finding someone who can write plus be a content expert, so that it makes your job easier. When it comes to residency, I would go one step further than what you just said of making good friends, is to find a program that supports the culture of what you want, because that program is going to look for people that support their culture, and whatever that culture is what you're going to be part of. And if that is a group of collegial, hardworking people that want to be friends, and that's great. That's what you have found, and you're going to make great friends there, and you're going to support each other. If the culture is, dog eat dog, cutthroat, like that's the culture that you've accepted and that's what you got into, it's going to be more challenging because they've looked for people to fit that culture. So whatever culture you want, whatever place you're looking for that you think you would thrive in, your interview with us is just as much us interviewing you as it is you interviewing the program to find something that fits for you. If that would be my biggest advice I could give for residency. Of course, you have to work hard. Of course, you have to study and all of those other things, but finding a program that fits you, because only you know you, right? We get, especially with virtual interviews, we only get such a short glimpse into who you are as a person. Finding the program that fits you is the hardest part. There were a few questions that were asked in the chat, so I just want to answer these ones. How did you stay up to date on all the topics when you were editing the second version? And I think that's exactly the reason that we have authors, right? We are the editors, which means that we review everything that an author puts forward. So the author has to be the content expert on that chapter, and they have to stay up to date on all of that. Then within our textbook, we split areas based on what we were content experts in. So for me, that's like venous disease and IVC filters and women's health and, kyphos and things like that. So those are the chapters that I edited versus, Haskell did portal hypertension, and, each one of us chose things that were our strengths to edit. To do the entire thing as a content expert would be extremely grueling and very hard to do if it wasn't for my co-author or my co-editors, where we each kind of picked what was good for us. The second question on that was, how did we decide to add or remove sections like the acute care section? That was also a very tough choice because we already had a long textbook, and Springer was not interested in making it much longer. But IR continues to expand, right? We're continuing to create new procedures. We realized there was a gap in some of the stuff that we did have. We even thought about adding a pediatric chapter, but that's literally a whole textbook of itself. The pain management chapter that we added could really be a whole textbook. So we tried to put all of it into one chapter. I don't know if it worked out the best way, because I feel like each part of the pain management chapter is a disservice to that because it doesn't go into enough depth. Although it does give you kind of the overall glimpse of what is in all the pain management stuff that we can do. The acute care section, I feel like in the first edition, we did a chapter that was supposed to encompass all of the clinical side of IR, but man, that's too much for one chapter. So we spread it into a few different things. As you all know, it's crucial to understand the acute care for our patients and like dealing with a bleeding patient, dealing with the arrhythmias that you may experience, those kinds of things. And so we felt as though in order to be a textbook designed for trainees, for you to truly understand how to care for our patients. For like the sick IR patient, we had to include those things. But that one, that wasn't even my idea. The resident came and he's like, I really think this would be a great addition. I'm like, you know what? That is an amazing idea. So, that's what we did. And we moved forward with that. I can't come up with all of these ideas myself. And that's the beauty of it being so many chapters and such a big topic. Any textbook though, even in like a PhD textbook, you could be like, oh, well, you're missing DBA, or you're missing, a certain part of it, and maybe I can contribute in that way. So those are the two dedicated questions to us, to that chapter. But I think the other thing that Joji asked is, let's hear about your training at Rush and UVA, if you want to start.
Yeah, so I kind of talked a little bit about it. So we do our full 6 years here. So I moved here from New Jersey for a general surgery intern year, which was hard, but fun at the same time. Met a lot of people. Then we start radiology for 3 years. Most of it is all diagnostic radiology. We do 2 years of IR as an intern, 1 year as a PGY2, 2 as a PGY3, and then 1 as a PGY4. Those have increased a little bit since I went through them. We're actively changing things as the years go on based on feedback. We also have a night float system, so we have 24-hour IR in-house. So as juniors, we do a lot more nights when we're on IR. A little bit less procedures than maybe other residencies do, because we are doing nights and consults and stuff like that. So we're learning kind of the clinical part of IR while we're on diagnostic radiology. And then we start PGY5 doing all the procedures. You're still clinical, you're going to clinic about 1 day a week. And then you are seeing consults about 1 day a week. And then your other 3 days are procedures, pretty long days. We come in round at 6 a.m. We have like a teaching hour from 7 to 8 a.m., whether that's doing liver tumor board or different didactics or different conferences. And then from 8 to when the day's done, we're doing procedures. I would say probably on average anywhere from like 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Is kind of when we finish. And then in terms of call, as a PGY5 and PGY6, it's a lot better now than it was in the past because we have that night float system. So the juniors are actually in-house holding the pager, and then they call us when something is needed. If there's a consult where, they either, the more junior you are, the more phone calls you're going to get. If it's like a PGY4 holding the pager at night, then they'll probably really only call you for cases that ultimately need to go. And then we look it up, discuss with the attending, and then everyone comes in to do the procedure. And then we do about maybe one weekday call every like 6-7 days, and then 1 weekend call every 6-7 weekends. So yeah, that's pretty much the training at Rush. It's awesome. The mentors here are awesome. You see everything besides trauma, really, but we do enough GI bleeds that it kind of covers how to do trauma cases and iatrogenic bleeds. But I think what makes the program is the mentors and my co-residents. So that's definitely what I enjoy the most about this program.
It's so interesting that you guys now have the pager with it's the diagnostic resident on call, I assume?
No, there's an IR resident on call.
Interesting.
So yeah, like a PGY3, when they're on their month of IR, 1 whole week will be like nights and they hold the pager at night.
We had our diagnostic night float residents holding the pager, but just a year ago, we got rid of that because it delayed patient care, right? Because you're so busy on diagnostic nights.
Yeah.
Anyways, so training at UVA, I actually predated the IR residency. So I was in the clinical pathway, which is essentially the IR residency now, since Sahar Sabri, the program director at the time, helped in the creation of the IR residency. So I did a surgery intern year followed by, a mix of IR and diagnostic. and 2 months of vascular surgery, some ICU time, some time at the VA. So we got, you know, a different experience than at a teaching hospital. UNC, of course, I have to talk about UNC too. We do not have a integrated intern year, although we are working to get a month of IR training as an intern. And so like our intern last year, who's now an R1, did a month as an IR intern, which was great. But you know, both of the programs are very similar because we have so much redundancy between people who trained or worked at UVA and are now here, as we recruited 2 new attendings who just finished their fellowship from UVA and are starting. One started last week and one starts next week. So very excited about that. But the culture, I think, between both programs is very similar. They both do a lot of high-level cases. UVA does more of the aortic PAD cases, and UNC does more of the portal hypertension and oncology cases. If I were to compare, you know, numbers between the two, but everything shifts over the years, so it's hard to compare that exactly. Both of them do longitudinal clinics. Both of them focus on, you know, education. There's lots of lectures. Both of them have world-renowned attendings that, you know, travel internationally speaking on different things. You know, both of them do a lot of research. I can't say one is better than the other. Although I did love my time at UVA. And then there's a question on why I decided to be a PD. And I think that just goes back to my roots of why I even wrote the textbook, is that education for med students, residents is just something I'm really passionate about. I spent a while in private practice before I came to UNC. You know, they offered me a job at UVA, but it was just not the right fit for my family. So I moved down to Raleigh and took a private practice job here. That was not a good fit for me for a multitude of reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is that I really missed the education component, the teaching, the research, the going to conferences, and just having my IR family here. IR to me has always just been your second home because you spend so much time there. And that is a lot of what I was missing in my private practice. Not to say that you can't get that in private practice. But when I came to academics, it was with the mindset that I was going to become the program director, and I accepted the job as APD with the plan to become the program director thereafter. And so that's been going really well, and I think our trainees are happy as we make a lot of changes to, you know, continue to improve the program as we grow. I think we're done talking. That was a lot of talking.
I have one more question. Also, let me just open it to the chat, actually. So does anyone else have any questions that you would like to unmute and ask?
I had one question. Many of us, like starting out with textbook writing, are just starting out with writing chapters. What would you say is like the best way to jump into writing a chapter, or how do you start that process? I don't know if you guys have experience on top of being editors, or what do you look for as editors? But like, how would you recommend we go about that?
So I've written a bunch of chapters now, both for my textbook as well as others. And I guess, let me ask you a question back before I answer. Is this the second edition or thereafter, or is it a first edition textbook?
For first edition.
Okay, so they should have given you some sort of guidelines. Sorry, I'm like looking at you on my other monitor. They should have given you some sort of guidelines on what to write, like word count, how many figures, that kind of stuff. If they didn't give it to you, then it's really free for all of what you want to do. The biggest thing you have to start off with is just your research. I find that Zotero is like a free online citation manager, because then I can go from any computer as long as it's logged in. So I have it on my work computer, my home laptop, where it's so convenient, where you've opened up a journal article and you just hit the button and it automatically cites it for you. And it's free. I really like it. I used eBib or something else that was much more painful the first time around, but highly recommend using Zotero for your citations. But really just starting out reading articles on what your topic is the first step. Everybody writes a different way. Some people start with the introduction and start going. Some people divide it into chunks. Some people write an outline, just kind of how you write. I just start from the beginning and just start spewing out information. And then eventually it forms into something cohesive after multiple edits. I personally am not a big like writing a huge outline and then that guides me. Just kind of however you write best. Oh, that's what I use. EndNote. EndNote was so painful. Highly recommend Zotero.
I'm actually the opposite. I'm an outline person. Since I guess again, like when you're writing something about a topic you are not an expert in, it can be kind of hard. So it's not just writing that is the work you need to do. Majority of the work is actually everything you need to look up. So if you're writing it in collaboration with an attending who is an expert, but you're doing the writing part, the research part is going to be the longest part. You need to read a lot about what you're about to write on. So for me, I do make an outline basically of where I want the chapter to look like, and then kind of read up on each subject and how I'm going to outline the chapter, and then start the writing process. Definitely was not English writing was not my like strong point in high school and stuff. I did not enjoy writing. I wasn't good at it. I was like a math and science girl. So writing doesn't come easy to me. So it doesn't have to be able to write a textbook. You just have to know what works for you, and then put in the work to be able to do it.
I think it's different for everybody. My research, like originally back in med school, started out with editing someone else's work who English was not their first language. So editing to me just kind of came naturally. It's what I started doing. And so from there, I found out that like writing in the medical way was very easy for me. Writing back in English class in high school, that was not easy. This for me was very easy. It was the research part that was more challenging to me, and like reading so many papers, which like said a lot of the same things. It was just like very cumbersome. So for everybody, you're going to have strengths and weaknesses. Other questions, anyone?
If we don't have any other questions, maybe we can wrap this up and just have both of our speakers give their final thoughts. Any advice for trainees?
Since I'm still a trainee myself, I guess I can only speak to the trainees younger than me. But I think my general advice is just put yourself out there. IR is a very nice field, I would say. All your attendings are going to be easily approachable, or not all, but most of your attendings are going to be easily approachable. So put yourself out there, and whatever you want to do, once you commit to doing it, put in the work, and everything else will follow.
I totally agree with that. For textbook chapter writing, or as a whole, again, if you say you're going to do it, you have to follow through. It's so much worse if you don't follow through and then someone has to keep hounding you. It's a lot of work, but in the long run, it was so worth it. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. Maybe not right before my core, but I could still do it again in a heartbeat. For residency as a whole, just it's work, but it's only a short period of your life, right? You've already made it through med school, and it's what, 6 years? 6 years is such a short period, and it flies. And so enjoy it while you're there and take the best parts out of it. If you don't love neuro or mammo or whatever. If there's a part of it that you don't love of your training, then figure out a part that makes you happy within there. I did not love neuro, but I loved the parts of it where VIR could maybe treat. So those are the things I focused on, all the CTAs and the exciting parts of it to me. And so to find each part of every rotation to find something that you love in it really helps. Kind of the less appealing rotations go by. And you're ultimately going to have to learn all of it, right? That's what sets IR apart from every other specialty that does image guided procedures, is our diagnostic foundation. So go out there and take your brilliant ideas and, write the next amazing textbook in IR.
I want to extend, oh, sorry, 1 sec. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who attended and participated in today's event, and a special thank you to Dr. Keefe and Dr. Patel for sharing their insights with us today. I thought this session was incredibly informative and helpful.